On today's show, the first round of the 2026 NBA draft is now in the books. The Atlanta Hawks stayed put at 8-23, made 2 picks. We'll break those picks down right now with analysis, scouting reports, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2269 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday here in late June. And the first round of the NBA draft is now in the books. All the lead up, all the weeks of scouting reports and tape watching and intel gathering, all that stuff is now not over because they've still second round to come tomorrow. But the Atlanta Hawks, after a bunch of trade rumblings and machinations and buzz and all that fun stuff, ended up making their picks in the exact spots that they were coming into the night. Number 8 and number 23. Overall, they draft Kingston Flemings out of Houston and Zuby Ejiofor out of St. John's. And there's plenty to talk about with those two selections. Early in the podcast, I'll talk about my broad takeaways to those two picks. Later on, I'll have a deeper scouting report on both players. Obviously, Flemings is the bigger headline grabber, being a top 10 pick, and a guy I talked about quite a bit coming into the process. And then Ejiofor was a mild surprise later on in the draft. And then, honestly, there's a lot more work to do for this roster. So I want to start there. Every year this happens, and I totally understand why to some degree, but it's like there is a rush to decide what the roster is going to be for the Hawks after the draft, even though free agency hasn't even started yet, and no trade stuff's happened so far other than the move to add Aaron Wiggins a few days ago. And it's like there's a best player available contingent, which I think the Hawks always want to be. And Onsi Saleh has been very, very upfront about how they want to be a best player available front office when it comes to the draft. But then it's like, hey, why didn't they do this or why didn't they do this? And I try to always say, and I said this leading up to the draft as well, I like to basically not think that I'm smarter than I am and that everyone misses on draft picks. And I have my evaluations that I have passed along. We'll pass along today. But I think in general, this is a pretty good night for the Atlanta Hawks. Is it exactly what I would have done with the second pick? Spoiler alert, no, it was not. But it was also in the firmly reasonable range for me. And at number 8 overall, it was the guy that I actually would have taken. So again, we'll kind of go broad early on and then we'll dive a little bit deeper later on in the show. But the Hawks started the day. There was some intel. I've made this point too. No one knew what the Hawks were going to do. It was kind of funny. I said this last night on the show in the final episode that I did late into the night on Monday evening into Tuesday. I got some pushback, but it really was true. No one in the NBA world had a great feel of what the Hawks were going to do, and that was on purpose. I know that now. I mean, the Hawks like to have it to where they are not leaking external information. There was a little bit of a buzz that the Hawks might try to trade up in the hours before the pick was in, basically, on Tuesday evening. I asked, actually, Onsi Saleh post-draft in his press conference tonight if there were things that were bubbling up, basically, and he did acknowledge that there was a, quote, bunch of calls with different things and concepts with different teams, but they ultimately, quote, felt that drafting the two players that we drafted was most important for us, end quote. And no surprise there when you actually make the 2 picks, but there were some calls that I heard about, and it doesn't matter now because those didn't happen, didn't come to fruition, but the Hawks ended up staying put. And I always say, like, even if there is intel, the most likely place for any draft pick to be made that comes into the night is that same spot. There are lots of trades. There were trades in this first round all over the place, but the Hawks ended up staying put. And their first pick was Kingston Flemings at number 8 overall. So if you follow the podcast already, you will know this dating back to the last few weeks. But he was the highest rated player for me available with the way the board broke down in the top 7, which I know that people might have recognized. Ironically, it was not the exact same order, but it was the exact same top 7 as the Locked On Podcast Network mock draft that went down a week or two ago in this space. As the Hawks, basically acting as the Hawks in that mock draft, I took Flemings at number 8, as did the Hawks today. Doesn't mean that they were always going to agree with me, but on this point, they did. There was a run of 4 guards in a row that included Flemings at the end of that. And I know the Hawks did at least listen to offers to move up, down, etc. But he would have been the guy that I would have taken. So through that lens, doesn't mean I'm right or that the Hawks are right. But at number 8 overall, with the way the board broke down at 7, barring a trade offer that I am not aware of that the Hawks got to move down from 8, I would have done exactly what the Hawks did here. So I'll just obviously grade that as a positive because that would have been my selection. Moving down the board at 23, Zuby Ejiofor was not the consensus guy. I don't think I saw many mocks with him in that slot. I always try to stress that mocks down to 23 are not very reliable. The range was always quite wide, which I made a point to say on the podcast 24 hours ago, especially at that spot. And look, overall, it was not necessarily the pick that I would have made with my board, but I also believe strongly that it's a totally reasonable pick. And look, my publicly available draft tiers, I posted them on Patreon. They are out there before the draft. That backs that up. He was in the tier of guys that I basically described as being players and prospects that I'd be totally fine drafting at number 23 overall. He was in that tier. On the consensus board, he was, I believe, number 26. That's firmly in the range of 23. Candidly, and I tweeted this too before the picture actually happened, I did have Baylor wing Cam Carr as my best available player at the time. That would have been what I would have done in a vacuum, but he was the only guy I had in a different tier than Ejiofor, so it's not a big reach whatsoever. He was in that tier with a bunch of other guys, like a dozen other players in that kind of, early to mid 20s into late 20s, etc. And I always understand there's a rush to plug rookies into the structure of the rotation right away. And as soon as they picked Ejiofor, honestly, I've been covering the Hawks for 15 years. I was a fan of the team before that. I knew it was going to happen. There was going to be a freak out about his lack of height in particular, and the Hawks not having a 7-foot center on their roster right now. And I get all that. I really do. I saw it coming a mile away. I will just say they don't have to address every need in the draft. That's not what the draft is. Number one, you don't draft for need. That's a philosophy that I share with Onsi Saleh. Also, you don't draft for rookie season. You are drafting for 2 or 3 years from now and beyond with any pick, and that's the case here. I know that there were guys that might have fit into boxes. And look, I'm not saying that Ejiofor is going to be the right pick or the wrong pick right now. I just said I would have taken him probably. But it is in the reasonable range, and there was no law. And look, in the mock draft that I did and explained this on the podcast, I took a wing at number 23. There was no law that the Hawks had to come out of this draft with a 7-foot center. That was just not going to be the case. Now, do the Hawks still need another center for this coming season that they need to acquire via whatever means, whether it's free agency or a trade? Yes, they definitely do. But especially at number 23 overall, it's totally fine if that player plays not at all next year. The Hawks are in a spot that a lot of teams are not in. The Hawks won 46 games last year. They won 2 games in the first round of the playoffs. They led the Knicks in a series after 3 games. I'm not saying that was the end-all be-all, but that did happen. And normally teams that have that profile and who are on the upswing age-wise are not picking number 8 overall. But regardless, the reality is neither Flemings nor Ejiofor are projected to be one of the top 5, 6, 7 players that the Hawks have on their roster if they're trying to win a game on October 15th. It's more of a long-term play. Flemings will play, I'm sure, as a rookie. Ejiofor may not. We just saw Asa Newell was drafted almost the exact same spot a year ago. Asa was in the rotation at times and out of the rotation at times. That's totally fine. So anyway, long story long, I will not do any more ranting about that. But Onsi has been clear and consistent about best player available. For me, he showed that again here. I know that point guard, long-term and even short-term backup point guard was a need for the team. The guards that were, I thought number 8, there was a guard-heavy range. I know they could have taken Adai-Mara. Adai-Mara, by the way, went below Morez Johnson. Was not even the first big selected in the draft. I tried to say that like Mara wasn't quite as popular in the league as he was with some Hawks fans, but I thought guard at some point was going to happen in this class because just there were so many guards that I liked in this draft. That was a best player available pick that also was a need pick. That can both be the case. But last year, the Hawks drafted Asa Newell at 22. That was not a need pick at all. That was a best player available pick. The Hawks already had Jalen Johnson. Asa Newell's a power forward, and they drafted him anyway. Now they show it again here with Zuby Ejiofor. Again, it may not be the right pick, but they clearly took the best player available. That was the sentiment that Onsi passed along. They didn't need a combo big, which is what Zuby Ejiofor is. They clearly just think he's the best player. And he brings them some physicality, I'll talk about more later on, and some edge and some attitude that the Hawks actually could use in the future. He's a versatile defender, a playoff player is the way that I would describe it, especially on defense in the future if things break the right way. And look, at number 8 overall, I think it's unrealistic to expect that you're going to get a star at 8. Would it be nice to get one? Absolutely. But at number 8, you want to get a starter. Like a good starting player is a good outcome at number 8 overall. That may not be sexy, but it's also true and borne out by the history of the draft. At 23, if you get a rotation player, you've done well. So adjust expectations accordingly. Again, is it great to get someone better than that? Sure. Jalen Johnson was drafted at 20. I understand that. That's more of a rare occurrence than getting someone who's a solid rotation player. But anything better than that's gravy, and I'll leave it there for now. Again, I'll get into some deeper scouting reports on Flemings and Ejiofor. I do want to just say that Onsi Saleh talked extensively after the first round was over. Praised both of them, as you would expect. Obviously, there's a little bit of a grain of salt to anything an executive is saying about guys he just drafted. He's going to praise them. I totally understand that. But he talked about how they were like some of the more physical, complete players. Attitude was obviously fantastic. Onsi said, and I quote, "They fit everything that we are about. They fit everything about what we want to do moving forward." He praised them off the court as well. In particular, Flemings is already well known as an awesome off the court character, potential leader in the future, and Onsi was effusive about that. He praised Fleming's point of attack defense, the benefits of the spacing on his game, which we'll talk about later on, with Houston kind of playing a clogged up offense in the way that he was not going to have in the NBA. And he also praised his advantage creation, which is a huge thing the Hawks do need, and Flemings, I think, is going to help address that. He described Ejiofor as a guy who could switch 1 through 5 on defense. That's definitely part of the appeal. If they believe that makes even more sense that they're doing this in the draft. Processing speed, offensively, making the right play. Both guys are really quality passers. That's kind of showing through the Hawks do value that passing and processing, and both Flemings and Ejiofor bring that. I actually asked Onsi how he views Ejiofor positionally, and he noted that he can play both the 4 and the 5, which I agree with. And he also said, and I quote, "It's more to me about who you guard on that end of the floor, and you can figure out the other stuff afterward," end quote. Well, Hawks fans love that? No, but I actually agree with that viewpoint. And again, talked about the trade activity. We'll never know what was close, what wasn't close. But as an overall first segment ender here, kind of my broad takeaway on the night, I think it was a successful night for the Hawks. Was it the A+ that last year was when they got a trade basically fell in their lap for New Orleans, a crazy overpay? That's not realistic to always expect. But is it a draft that I would grade quite well? Yes. They got the guy that I would have taken at number 8 overall. Again, I could be wrong, but if through that lens, I really like that pick. And at 23, I am fine with Zuby Ejiofor. Am I over the moon? No. But do I think it's reasonable? Do I think he has a playoff skill set? Yes. So like if I was giving it a grade, I don't know, B+, something like that. I like what the Hawks did today. Doesn't mean it's going to be a dance in the streets, grand slam every time, but I do like what they did, and I'll talk much more about Flemings in particular and also Ejiofor later on in the podcast. First, though, a word from our partners on the show. Workplace chaos can show up fast. The problem is that finding the right candidate can take a lot more time than most people actually want to afford to spend, and that's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. At Indeed, they have to reach the candidates that actually fit with what we're looking for based on skills and experience, location, etc. Finding the right person can make all the difference for you, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. And what great addition. You can actually have a ripple effect on every single person around that person. When you find someone that actually brings the right skills and attitude and experience to the table, it makes the entire group better. That's why finding qualified candidates matters so much, and why tools like Indeed Sponsored Jobs help make the process so much easier. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who actually check all the boxes that you want. That brings less stress, less time wasted, and more results to the table. When you actually need the right person to cut through all the chaos, it's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of the podcast get a $75 sponsored job credit that actually helps you get to your premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying that you've heard about Indeed on this podcast. One more time, the place to go is Indeed.com/podcast. Restrictions apply. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. ED is way more common than most guys might think. Millions of guys deal with it at some point. It's exactly why HIMSS offers a straightforward way to handle it. At HIMSS, they connect you with licensed healthcare providers online, giving you access to legitimate ED treatment options from the comfort of your own home, with no awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process that actually makes it easier to take care of yourself. The entire process is really simple. Just complete a quick online intake, and a provider reviews your information. If treatment is right for you, it ships discreetly to your door in discreet packaging directly there, and it makes the entire experience feel private and stress-free for you. The entire process is straightforward, transparent, and designed to make getting care feel easy. To get simple, online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/lockedonnba. That's hims.com/lockedonnba for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnba. Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is a generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatris Specialty LLC and is not affiliated with or endorsed by Viatris. Get your Daily Hawks fix completely ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club today. Start your 7-day free trial right now and get closer to the team without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes right now. Go to lockedonhawks.supercast.com to claim your free trial. And we'll dive in now a little bit deeper to Kingston Flemings. Obviously, he is the headliner, number 8 overall pick. I've given, obviously, some scouting report stuff on the podcast. I know it's a different audience the night of the draft, and I wanted to give you a breakdown of what I see, what he is, and clearly he'll be talked about for the next several years. Several years coming up, he'll, I'm sure, be in both Utah and Las Vegas. But I want to give you my pre-draft summary. Watched a lot of film on him already, even watched a little bit more in the last hour, both wrapping up, waiting for Onsi, and then also before the podcast. So getting familiar, and I've seen a lot of him. So big fan of him, number 1, which obviously I already said, as I would have taken him number 8 overall. But 19-year-old point guard out of Houston, measured 6'2.5", without shoes at the combine. So I want to start there. There's a notion that he's a super small guard. And I get it. He's not as big as Keaton Wagler. He's not as big as Braden Burries. He's not as big as even Michael Brown Jr. But 6'2.5" without shoes is not a tiny point guard. Like in the old way that they used to announce heights, it was with shoes, and that would have been, 6'3.5", closer to 6'4". That is perfectly normal point guard size. He's bigger than Trae Young. He's not as small as the small. The league's gotten bigger for sure. Referring to him as a small point guard is not unreasonable, but I just want to say, I think it's been overstated in the last. I mean, even tonight, a lot of people oh, he's tiny. No, he's not really tiny. 6'2.5" without shoes is like a perfectly normal size. Anyway, he averaged 16 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, and a steal and a half at Houston this season with 48, 39, 85 shooting splits, which is actually quite good. He was the first freshman in Division I history to average 16, 5, and 4 with fewer than 2 turnovers per game. Just a really steady, mature player for his age. I think he has underrated power physically for that pretty thin frame that he had. I think he's going to fill out. He is already, though, the big thing with Flemings in a lot of ways is that he's so athletic and quick. Honestly, made reference to this during his comments tonight. He might have been the best athlete of guards in the class. He's so fast. He tested off the charts at the combine in those ways. He blows by defenders, can generate paint touches, get to the rim. That's very helpful. Get into the paint. Tested off the charts again. That's also on the film. Some guys test really well. It's not on the film. He is a guy who you could see the speed on film. That speed and awareness make him a big-time transition threat, I think. He'll fit really well with what the Hawks want to do, how fast Quinn wants to play. Kingston actually did a quick Zoom with us tonight and said that he actually did a Zoom interview with Quinn Snyder pre-draft. I've already heard through the grapevine that Quinn is high on Kingston Flemings. Unsurprisingly, he's going to help push the pace, give him another option as a ball handler, etc. I'm not saying he's going to be this, but he compared himself when he was asked tonight to guys like Tyrese Maxey, De'Aaron Fox. And those were also kind of out there as comps before. I think Maxey is obviously a super high-end outcome, all-NBA player, but you can kind of see it. They're not dissimilar that much in size. They're both very quick. Fox, I'd say young De'Aaron Fox is a reasonable comp. Hilariously tonight, I saw people saying, "Oh, that would be a bad outcome." That's insane. I think current De'Aaron Fox is probably an overrated player who's overpaid, but De'Aaron Fox has made an all-star team. De'Aaron Fox at number 8 overall would be a very good outcome. It's insane to suggest otherwise. Anyway, it's also funny that he got asked about NBA players, and he actually just said those guys, as well as Cason Wallace, who was an interesting comp as well. But offensively, beyond stuff I already said, operating in pick and roll, he's very comfortable there. Houston had a very strange offensive context, but he was able to navigate it really well. Not a lot of shooting. Houston plays a very old school college basketball style. I love watching them play defense, but offensively, it's kind of a mess at times. But Kingston was huge in helping them play more effectively. He was really, really good in the advanced metrics like BPM and those kind of catch-alls in the college level, which is impressive for a 19-year-old guard in the Big 12. He has all the little tricks as well that small guards need to kind of draw fouls and beat guys. But also, Onsi said this, and I would echo it, he does not need a screen to beat players. And that's a huge thing for a small guard. If he can kind of beat you in isolation, there are more avenues to being successful offensively. Pull-up shooting is comfortable there. I think one of the bigger swings about his upside is Flemings didn't take a ton of pull-up threes in the college level. I think and how well he shoots them will be a question. He shot the ball well from 3 this year, but the volume wasn't huge. He already has some interesting mid-range stuff, though, which very much helps. I love the passing, the live dribble passing in particular, pick and roll passes. decision making. But he even mentioned tonight, he was asked by somebody in the media that he basically what he was going to try to showcase more in the NBA level. And he said 3-point shooting. I think the extra space, which Onsi talked about too, is going to help him. I think he's going to shoot it well. The shot's not like what you would draw up in a lab necessarily, but I think it's always gone in, even at lower levels, and he shot well at the college level. I think he'll shoot it and shoot it well, so I'm not worried about that whatsoever. So he is small. Not tiny, but smaller. It's the number one knock on him. He is bigger than Trae Young, for example, and a recent player. He's more engaged defensively than a lot of point guards. Like in this class in particular, he's a better defender already than like Darius Acuff, for example. I think he might be better than Michael Brown, who's bigger than him already. Look, I would have had Burries defensively, probably is bigger, but I think that I'm not particularly worried about Fleming's defense. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe there'll be some matchups where he gets taken advantage of, especially early in his career before he gets bigger. But I think it's going to be fine to good. I really do. 3-point volume, as I said before, there are some questions that I think are reasonable about his ultimate upside. That's not crazy to suggest. I'm not worried about it too much, honestly, at number 8 overall. Again, as I said before, getting a star there is like not the baseline. If he was the second pick of the draft, I would get those questions more, but it's not crazy to ask that question. But the last thing I want to say, and I already said it once briefly, I want to say it one more time. He is extremely positive intel off the court and makeup wise, like off the charts. And I'm not just saying that because I don't have any reason to gas him up any more than I would, but everyone loves him. He's competitive. He wants to win. He, like the guys at Houston loved him. Coaches love him. Media love him. Everybody loves him. He wrote this Players Tribune piece this week that people really enjoyed. And even before that, it was off the charts intel. That's not why the Hawks take him. I just say that out loud. But if it was close with somebody else or if it was a tiebreaker, the Hawks do value the culture stuff, hard work, but also just like being a leader and being like an adult at 19 years old. And I think he's a great fit there. So beyond my own evaluation, if you don't want to believe me, that's totally fine. I get that. People that I trust in the draft space who do this full time had Flemings rated at least as highly. Ben Pfeiffer, friend of the pod, had him 5th on his board. Brian Schroeder, friend of the pod, had him 5th. John Wasserman, friend of the pod, had him 7th. Sam Vecini had him in the top. I think he was 7th for Sam as well. He wrote the following about Sam in his draft guide. Quote, Sam said he would bet on Flemings making an all-star game at some point and being the kind of point guard teammates love playing with, end quote. That's pretty good praise for a guy, and Sam is, I think, maybe the best person doing this. So to be clear, this is not one of those moves that I'm over the moon losing my mind about like I was last year for the Pelicans trade. I did say then that was a rare instance where I was like, there's just like no argument against it. Of course, there are potential downfalls with Flemings. It'd be crazy to suggest otherwise. Every player outside of the uber elite guys have real risk, but I think Flemings is relatively safe. I think that I think he's going to be a really good player. I really do. And again, he was the guy that I would have taken at this spot. So at number 8, star value would be awesome. It would be really, really good for the Hawks if he became a even fringe all-star, like 2-time all-star kind of guy. That'd be awesome. But I think that there are outcomes where he can be an all-star. But my projection would be he just becomes like a quality starting point guard. And if he does that, it's a good pick. Like, that might sound boring to you, and it shouldn't, because quality starters get paid $30 million a year, and they're in high demand, and I think Flemings can run the team. He's 19 years old, and look, we'll talk about this plenty in the next couple of months. He's not going to start opening night, nor should he. TJ McCollum will be better in the NBA on October 15th than Kingston Flemings. That's all part of the plan. They all know that. McCollum's going to be an awesome mentor. McCollum's been in the league for 12 years or whatever it's been. It's a good setup for a 19-year-old guard to enter. There's not a ton of pressure for him to be awesome right away. The Hawks are trying to win games right now. And usually I would say, hey, rookies are not very good. There's a chance that Flemings is not an awesome player in the NBA as a rookie. Most rookies are not. But I think this is a good spot to come in, be a backup early on, grow, improve, fix your flaws as things go along. And overall, I very obviously, because of what I said before, but I'm very excited about what this pick could be for the Hawks. I think it's a good investment. It was the pick I would have made, and I will leave it there for now. In a moment, I will dive into Zuby Ejiofor and then look ahead a little bit to tomorrow where the Hawks do have a pick way down the board in the second round. We'll get all of that and more in just one moment. There are more live events we're seeing right now than ever. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part is usually not just deciding what you want to attend, it's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times Checkout process can actually be confusing and surprise fees sometimes. Buying tickets can be sometimes harder than it actually should be. That's why so many fans are turning to the folks at the Gametime app. The app's built to actually make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy the tickets, and exclusive savings opportunities to help you get to the events that you want without any of the usual hassle. My biggest pet peeve, arguably, about tickets is actually you think you find a great deal and you get all the way to the end of the process to check out, and then suddenly the final price looks totally different. It's actually enraging. But with Gametime, none of that actually happens. Take all the uncertainty out of the process, and I absolutely love that. What you see is what you will pay with Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every single type of event with the folks at the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account with Gametime and redeem that code. It's LOCKEDON for Locked On for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. All right, so as I've kind of talked around, I understand there are different camps. I am totally understanding of people that wanted to draft a Di Mara in particular at number 8 overall, or if they might have preferred Braden Burries or Jackson Lindeborg or whatever. I'm not saying that Flemings is the only pick, but it's the one I would have made. It seems in the reaction that I've seen that Ejiofor is the more controversial pick. It is down the board. The emphasis on that should be a little bit lower, I would imagine, for good reason. The range was bigger at 23. And even for me, I've already admitted on this podcast, he wouldn't have been the guy that I probably would have taken. But that said, there's a lot to like about Zuby Ejiofor. And I think it's crazy to suggest otherwise. And I always say this, basketball is more than measurables. You don't have to be put in a certain box. The Hawks have several players like that who have proven to be very good players who are not in easy boxes. To name two, I would say Dyson Daniels and Onyeka Okongwu are both guys who don't fit in exact little boxes that are archetypal. With that said, Ejiofor is a combo big out of St. John's. He played at Kansas to begin his college career. One of the best players in the country last year in college, full stop. That might sound like I'm being overly praised. I'm really not. He was an All-American selection. He was the Big East Player of the Year last year. The Big East is not a small conference. That's obviously a big deal. And also beyond those like more honors, he was number 3 in the country in BPM last season in college, behind Cam Boozer and Jackson Lindeborg, who was on the national championship team. Zuby was an awesome player. That's just full stop. What was the case? He's 22 years old. He is younger than Jackson Lindeborg by a couple years, but older than most guys. Played 4 years in college, 6'7.5" without shoes. I said the same thing that I said before about Kingston. In the old way that we used to measure heights, he would have been basically listed at 6'9". That's not big, but it's not tiny the way that it's sometimes framed. Obviously, that is small for a center, but as I said before, Onsi said he could play both spots in the front court. I would agree with that. He's not a pure center. He's a 4'5". 7'2" wingspan, which is bigger than you would expect for his height. For example, same wingspan as Henry Vesar, who was a center-only guy from UNC, and Hans Steinbach, who went in the first round tonight. Both those guys, same wingspan as Zuby Ejiofor. 8'11" standing reach is totally solid, honestly. Same as Merez Johnson, a top 10 pick. 1 inch shorter than Hans Steinbach, standing reach. So those guys are not considered to be small in the way that Ejiofor is. And also, he weighed 245 at the combine, and it's muscle. Like, he's a stout individual. He scored also very, very, very well at the combine athletically. He had one of the fastest shuttle runs in the entire combine, including guards. He had great athletic scores. That helps his projections in a lot of ways. Big picture scouting report wise, for me, is the calling card is that defense. He's going to be, I think, very good, aggressive, rugged, physical, tough on defense. He plays extremely hard all the time, which I love for a role player. And stepping back even further, what appeals to me about Zuby Ejiofor, among other things, is that he knows what he is. A lot of guys coming out of college have to kind of have a transition point to where they're like, hey, now I am a role player for the rest of my life. Zuby Ejiofor was All-American this year. He knows exactly what he is and what he's not. And he plays with himself, and there's some self-awareness there that I definitely appreciate, and I think he's kind of gotten there in a good way. He's very strong. Guys bounce off of him. I think he'll be able to defend all over the place, multiple coverage. He has good feel defensively. I've heard he's a good communicator defensively as well. He has the ability to switch, play at the level, different coverages, etc. Rim protection-wise was actually quite good this year. He blocked more than 2 shots a game at St. John's. And for me, the kind of guy who can defend in a playoff series. Again, there's projection there. It's a late first-round pick, but that's what it is. Offensively, it's definitely more of a mixed bag. So I like the defense, full stop. I like it a lot. Offensively, I'm not going to lie to you. It's uncertain on offense. And that's why he's available at 23. I will say he's a tremendous offensive rebounder, both by the numbers and by the film. It's his biggest skill on offense right now. He's tenacious. He attacks the rim. That's a helpful skill set for the Hawks to add. Also got to the line a ton at St. John's, which the Hawks could use. Good screener, I think. Good decision maker. I think the feel is really, really good for his passing. Not gonna have the ball a ton, but like he can run some actions. Not like as a pick and roll guy, but as a handoff guy. He can be a little bit of a hub. That's very possible. So I'm confident in the defense. That's what got him picked. He's going to rebound better defensively. That's the one thing that I will say about his defense. But I think his true swing skill is going to be his shooting. Onsi got to it a couple times tonight about how he shot it a little bit at St. John's. There was a tweet from Rick Pitino. That's actually a crazy thing to say out loud. Rick Pitino, who coached him at St. John's, talking about his shooting form being really good, how he's going to shoot in the NBA. It's a point of contention. If Ejiofor doesn't shoot in the NBA from three-point range at some point, I think his offensive ceiling is pretty low. And even, honestly, so is his offensive floor. If he shoots it, I think it's pretty easy to see how he is going to return value with this pick. So that's a huge swing. That's why I'm saying it's a swing skill. It is one. I think his release looks pretty good, actually. It's kind of slow, but they'll speed it up. Mechanics are pretty good. I think he's going to be able to shoot it. So long story short, he is a combo big. I think that he can play with a Kongwu in the future. I think he might be able to play next to Jalen at center in certain lineups. I am fully aware of the deluge of responses about how he can't possibly play center because he's that center size. I get it. But, and look, I've already said it once on this podcast. I will say it one more time. He does not solve the second center for the Hawks question going into next season. Nor would anybody have, even if they drafted Mora, they still would have needed somebody else because Mora is a rookie. Rookies are not generally going to be awesome. But with Ejiofor, he's more of a combo. And I think that the Hawks are going to need to add somebody else at center at some point, whether it's Jock Landale on the lower side, maybe even higher than that. I would not want to go into the season with my top two centers being a Kongwu and Ejiofor. I'm not saying that's going to be the case. But I think the Hawks will add more at center. And at 23, he could be in the G League sometimes. That's totally fine. He could be a 12th man, 13th man this season. That's totally fine. Mo Gay is probably better right now in an NBA game than Zuby Ejiofor. And they're very different players, but they play the same positions, which is notable. So, look, last thing about this, I think I would not worry about how he projects as a rookie. I would not worry about his position right now. I think his defense is going to play up. I think his physicality is going to play up. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But, yeah, I think the panic is going to be too strong. It was foreseeable. I get that. But, is there a world where it was the wrong pick and they should have gone with Chris Sinak or Henry Vesar or Terrace Reed? Maybe. That's possible. But I'm not going to judge that right now. I think it's a reasonable investment. And even with someone like Asa, who was not like a universally beloved pick, you can kind of see the archetype right away. With Zuby, we'll probably know fairly soon if it's like going to look like it's supposed to look. For now, I feel fine about it, and I'll leave it there for now. Okay, long one here with me talking. With that said, the second round is on Wednesday. The Hawks have a pick at 57. It's really hard to project that. Like, basically the second round from like 40 on sometimes gets like totally off the rails. All these picks are traded. Guys are stashed. Do the Hawks want to roster 3 rookies? I don't know. It would not surprise me at all if the Hawks did not pick at 57. It would not surprise me at all if they did pick at 57 or if it was a stash or whatever. So just know that going in. Also, look, I thought that there was a decent chance the Hawks would do some other like roster stuff in the day or so around the draft. And they haven't yet. So, for instance, they have roster spots to fill, needs to fill. They need another big, like I just said. They need to in some way address the Kuminga, Ricochet, Kispert, Healed situations. Those are all kind of out there, and they have a little bit of time. But with Healed, they have until literally the next day. So Jamar could be a trade spot for the Hawks, or they could just do very little. So we'll see. So I'll have you cover the entire way through. I'm hearing they will probably do an introductory press conference either Thursday or Friday for Flemings and Ejiofor. So if anything interesting from that happens, I might probably share that on the podcast to some degree. But the big thing is 2 picks, a good night for the Hawks, and I'll have plenty more on the draft stuff, the next steps, the deadlines coming up with team options for Gay and Kuminga, Buddy's guarantee date, Kispert, Richeche, et cetera, all that's coming up, I promise, later on in the week. So please stay tuned. Please subscribe to the podcast. Anywhere you find your podcast, just search Locked On Hawks, either at Apple or Spotify or YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and follow my non-podcast work about the Hawks, including full audio from Onsi tonight, everything else in between, at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening and watching this podcast. If it's your first time, stick around. I definitely encourage you to do that. And sincerely, though, appreciate the entire focus being, throughout the draft process, the support. It does not go unnoticed. So thank you for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you all next time.